Typically, you'd expect actors to be in the business of keeping themselves in work. If the trend of stars signing multi-picture deals and naturally gravitating towards the big franchises, where the money is biggest and sequels most likely has taught us anything, it's that steady work is still a consideration for actors even when they hit the real big time. So it should come as something of a surprise that some actors have actually talked themselves out of more work. Yep, you heard that right. Whether because they didn't want to play the character anymore, or because they fundamentally believed that death was the only way their characters' arcs could develop, this morbid few literally demanded that they be killed off in major movies. Whether they got their own way was sometimes a different matter though. I'm Gareth from Whatculture.com, and here are 9 actors who begged for their movie characters to die. Honorable mention: Sir Alec Guinness, Star Wars. Sir Alec Guinness's disdain for Star Wars has been well reported elsewhere already, but depending on who you believe, the acting legend might well have demanded his character be killed off because he thought the whole thing was terrible. The reason it only qualifies as an honorable mention here is that George Lucas actually claims it was his decision to kill Obi-Wan, because the character was no longer central to the plot after the Death Star escape. Apparently, this angered Guinness so much he almost walked away, which is far removed from him demanding death come for him. Number 9. Sean Connery, James Bond. Why he wanted to die. You'd think Sean Connery would be thankful for James Bond, since it sent his star profile rocketing towards the sky. But the man who notoriously turned down Gandalf apparently wasn't a big fan. By the time he was approaching the end of his run, Connery flat out hated the character and hated playing him, and demanded that he should be killed off permanently. So he didn't ever have to endure hearing about or seeing him on screen ever again, regardless of who played him. How it happened? Well, clearly it didn't. Bond lived on, and Connery even returned to play him after initially leaving, on the provision that 2 of his pet projects were greenlit and his pay was significantly improved. Number 8. Jamie Lee Curtis, Halloween H2O and Resurrection. Why she wanted to die. Considering she's come back twice to play Laurie Strode, it's strange to note that the Scream Queen initially wasn't all that keen. She was contractually obligated to return for Halloween H2O 20 years later, but wanted it to be the end of the series, which was impossible thanks to a clause wrote saying that legally the writers could never kill off Michael Myers. They reached an impasse and Curtis almost left just weeks before filming, only for a script rewrite to include the paramedic gimmick at the end, which saved the production. Curtis still insisted that there was no hint of a sequel, no matter how inevitable, and then requested that her character be killed off for that sequel in return for agreeing to the new story. How it happened? In the opening act of Resurrection, it's revealed that Michael Myers was never killed, and that Laurie accidentally killed an innocent paramedic he disguised as himself. Before he turns up at the psychiatric facility Laurie is kept in and kills her by stabbing her and throwing her off the roof. Now that's what you call overkill. Still wasn't enough to stop her returning for the other reboot though, was it? Number 7. James Marsden, X-Men The Last Stand. Why he wanted to die. When Bryan Singer left X-Men The Last Stand to go and make Superman Returns, it didn't matter to James Marsden that Matthew Vaughn had been hired to replace him, though he'd eventually drop out too for Brett Ratner. He wasn't interested. He asked for his character to be killed off, and the studio were more than happy, particularly when Marsden's availability dropped thanks to his schedule working with Singer on Superman Returns. How it happened. Given the context, we might have a little more explanation here for why Cyclops, the former leader of the group who ends up being cuckolded by Wolverine and sidelined entirely, is literally just exploded off screen by his former girlfriend. You don't do that to people you like, do you? Number 6. Brent Spiner, Star Trek Nemesis. Why he wanted to die. While Arnold Schwarzenegger is seemingly unswayed by the issues with playing a cyborg for decades, despite his very human real-life body aging visibly, that's precisely the concern that led to Brent Spiner asking for his Star Trek character to be retired. Spiner believed he could no longer convincingly play the eternally youthful android Data, so asked to be killed off permanently. How it happened. Naturally, Data sacrificed himself to save Captain Picard, after the Enterprise's captain had fought and killed his own clone, jumping through open space to the clone's ship with a personal transporter to allow Picard to get back to the Enterprise. He then destroys the ship and himself, and everyone is very, very sad. Weirdly, despite asking to be killed, Spiner is then immediately resurrected, as it turns out that Data's doppelganger android B4 actually has a copy of Data's personality files uploaded to him. Had there been the planned sequel, he would still have returned one last time. Number 5. Johnny Depp, 21 Jump Jump Street. Why he wanted to die. While it was a huge surprise when it happened, it always made sense that Johnny Depp would make a cameo appearance on the new 21 Jump Street film. It was, after all, the TV show that made him famous, and nostalgia is just about the most valuable currency in all of Hollywood. But when Jonah Hill approached him to appear, Depp said he'd only do it on two conditions. First, Peter DeLuise, who played Officer Doug Penhall in the original show, had to be involved too, and second, his character had to be killed off. As screenwriter Michael Bacall revealed, he wanted closure. I had so much respect for that. It's a brilliant idea that was absolutely not mine. It works fantastically. How it happened. When the climactic drug deal between secret drug-dealing PE teacher Mr. Walters and his distributors goes south, it turns out that two of the gang are undercover DEA officers, who reveal themselves as former Jump Street recruits and are swiftly killed off in the ensuing gun battle. Number 4. Sigourney Weaver, Alien 3. Why she wanted to die. Alien 3 was one of the most tortured film productions of all time, and it really didn't help that Sigourney Weaver was apparently difficult on set, at least according to co-star Ralph Brown. That might have had something to do with her fatigue with the franchise more than anything though, as it turned out she had requested to be killed off, and it wasn't merely the whims of an actor. Weaver later revealed that it was Fox's insistence on spinning Alien off that had forced her hand. She confirmed, "Well, yes, because I heard that Fox was gonna do Alien vs Predator, which really depressed me because I was very proud of the movies." That was also the reason Ridley Scott refused to return to Alien 3. And while AVP didn't actually come until after Alien Resurrection, it had been in the works since 1992, and was the real reason Ripley was killed off in the third film. How it happened. Having discovered that she's carrying an alien embryo and also that the Weyland-Yutani Corporation intend to use it for biological weaponry, Ripley decides the baby queen inside her has to die, and throws herself into the furnace to get it done properly. Number 3. Michelle Trachtenberg, Black Christmas. Why she wanted to die. In the 2006 remake of the classic 1974 slasher movie, the character of Melissa, played by Michelle Trachtenberg, had been intended to survive the sorority house murder fest, when the murderous, eyeless monster Agnes mistakes her being unconscious for being dead. But Trachtenberg had just finished her stint on Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and wasn't entirely keen on being in a horror movie, so insisted that the only way she'd sign on was if she was killed off. How it happened. With the girls trapped at the sorority house with their killer stalker, Melissa ends up on her own, a surefire sign of being dead meat in any horror movie, and ends up being murdered by an assailant with a pair of ice skates before her eyes are plucked out. Merry Christmas indeed. Number 2. Charlton Heston, Beneath the Planet of the Apes. Why he wanted to die. Unlike some of the others on this list, Charlton Heston didn't actually hate Planet of the Apes or his character, but he simply had no interest in returning to the role. Still, because he was an honorable man apparently, he did turn up in Beneath the Planet of the Apes when he was told he was indispensable. Fox studio head Richard D. Zanuck thought he was essential to the sequel, and despite some disagreements between the parties, Heston agreed to briefly appear only if his character was killed in the first reel, and also on the provision that his pay go to charity. In the end, he's not killed immediately, instead disappearing at the start of the movie only to return at the end when he is killed off. How it happened. After disappearing right at the start, Heston's tailor is found in a cell at the end of the movie, and helps new hero Brent try to avert a doomsday bomb explosion that would destroy the planet. Ultimately, they fail, and a mortally wounded tailor ends up triggering the bomb himself, while Heston does some excellent fake bloody hands acting. Number 1. Harrison Ford's Star Wars. Why he wanted to die. It's tempting to think Harrison Ford was always just a curmudgeon, and wasn't keen on continuing as Han Solo after his first appearance, but his desire to retire him prematurely was nothing to do with character fatigue at all. Instead, Ford has said that he wanted Solo killed because it fit his arc. He said, "I asked him to ask the writers to kill me off, because I thought that it would be good that the character who appeared to have not so much of a complex interweaving with the theme of the Force and all that good stuff. I thought it would be good that the character if he sacrificed himself in some noble way." He's clarified similar more recently too, saying, "I think it's a fitting use of the character. I've been arguing for Han Solo to die for about 30 years. Not because I was tired of him or because he's boring, but his sacrifice for the other characters would lend gravitas and emotional weight." How it happened? Well, initially, it didn't. But then Ford eventually got his way when he returned for Star Wars The Force Awakens, and Ben Solo closed his eyes for the final time. Heartbreak ensues, but Ford was presumably pretty happy,